Welcome to the Discover Montcalm Podcast, where we're going to take a look at the communities, the businesses, the attractions, and the people that make up Montcalm County. Here is your podcast host, Duane Weed.
Hello, and welcome to this edition of the Discover Montcalm Podcast. My name's Duane. I'm the host and the producer, and today I have a special episode that I'd like to share with you. It's called If This Barn Could Talk. Back in 2023, I had an idea as I was driving through Montcalm County. I kept seeing, driving by these barns. And one day as I'm driving by it, I went, if that barn could talk, what story would it tell? And I went, wait a minute, there's a podcast idea. So back in August 8th of 2023, I had a chance to sit down with my friend, George Ravell, here on Amy School Road, and we talked about his barn. The beauty of that, as I started interviewing him, it is a story about the barn and what it went through, but it really kind of, as you peel the onion away, it's about the family history that is wrapped around that barn. So this is the first edition of it, and on June 7th, 2024, my friend passed away. I never had an opportunity to share this episode with him before he passed, but as I was editing this, these are the stories of Montcalm County. These are the stories of the people in Montcalm County. So August 8th, 2023, sat down with George. He told me the story. We're coming up on this will be episode 95 in the Discover Montcalm podcast. I'm going to release it, and I'm going to let George tell the story of this barn that's behind us. And in May of 2024, it became a Centennial Farm. And George had a chance to witness that before he passed. So I think that's an honor that this is here, and that's why I'm doing the intro right here by this on the Ravell farm on Amy School Road. I'd like to thank Dan Salas for helping me on some of the color correction on the video. I had made a mistake and Dan stepped in and helped me out. So without further ado, here's the story of the barn on Amy School Road, the Ravell farm. Take it away, George.
Hello, I'm George Ravell, and I have a lifelong relationship with this barn behind me. I was born in Buffalo, New York, and my dad, the company my dad worked for, he became East Coast sales manager, and we lived in Manhattan. He was a lieutenant in the Army, and World War II started, and my mother and I moved back on the farm here. This farm was owned by my grandfolks, and they came from Ohio. They were tenant farmers in Ohio, and they were doing quite well, but land was so expensive that they thought they'd move to Michigan. So they come to Howard City in the December of 1908 with 3 boxcars of livestock, household goods, and their farm implements.
And what are their names?
Henry and Amanda Beisch. They came in December. My mother was a babe in arms. And my grandpa went to Howard City to get some kerosene for their lights and for cooking. And he went to Howard City. In Ohio, they call it coal oil. And he went to one place and they asked for coal oil. No, we don't have any. Went to another place and coal oil, they didn't have any. I mean, I was kind of disturbed. What do you mean, coal oil? That's everybody has that. Went to a third place and asked for coal oil, and the guy started laughing. He says, in Michigan, we call that kerosene. So it's just a difference of communicating from one area to another area, that everybody being on the same page. Here, obviously, all they did is the farming was done with horses, and in the barn on this side was stanchions for cows, and on the other side was horses. They had 4 box stalls over there for horses.
And can we go back a little bit? Your grandfather built the barn. Can you tell me the story of when you came here, there was a log cabin here that was that was the barn, and then they built this. I see that it says 1909 on the side of the barn, but it was not actually built in 1909,
it was
correct?
built in 1917, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the 80 acres had been logged off and the stumps pulled, and there was this log cabin behind. Every farm had a lilac bush. Log cabin behind the lilac bush, and then the front part of this house was built just out of a regular 2x4 type construction, and they used the log cabin for a barn. And then my grandfather and his nephew in 1917 built this barn, and so that was at the time the design was such, it was the latest and the greatest, and had all of the current ideas on what the barn should be. On the side on this side was stalls for livestock, and on the side of the right was four box stalls for horses. And of course, then all the transportation was horses, buggies or sleds for personal transportation, and farming with the farm works. My granddad, I remember, so during the war, World War II, my mother and I came to live with my grandpa and grandma, and of course, being on the farm, I just was tagging along, and then later actually doing work in the fields. And my granddad got at 37, just before the war, bought a new John Deere tractor, John Deere H, and but yet he still used the horses, and they put up hay, and there was the wagon. They had the tongue shortened off. They'd pull it with the tractor, and so I was quite small. I'd be driving the tractor, and out in the field in the hot, I'd be dazing off, and they'd holler out at me, George Henry, keep it in the hay row. And so it was the hay loader would go down where the hay had been windrowed and put together, and straddle that windrow, and the hay loader would bring the loose hay up onto the wagon, and then they would pull it forward. And they had a sling. One way to put the hay in the hay mow, they have a sling which consisted of four wooden bars put together with a rope mechanism, and had the hooks on each end. And so when they get the hay loaded up, they bring it into the barn, and they had horses, a rope attached to this sling, and then they'd pull it up to the top and hook it to a rope that went up into the top of the hay mound, and there's a carriage there, and they adjust that carriage so it go either left or one hay mound or the opposite hay mound. And then this was attached to a rope, a long rope, and this was going up in the hay mound and over, and then the horses, they would pull the rope out, and that would pull the hay up. It'd hit the carriage, swing over to the mow, and get into the mow, and they had another rope. They'd pull it and trip the sling and drop the hay into the hay mound.
That's quite a process. That sounds like, but it was the technology of the day.
Yeah.
So the barn, you're a young kid. You talk about the history as you grew up, maybe your teen years, and then you also went into the service. Can you bring us along during that time period?
Yes, of course, working with my grandfolks, just being a kid, helping out, stuff to do. Everybody is involved, and everybody did their project. And so when 4-H, the first year in 4-H, they gave me a heifer. So I'd take the heifer to Greenville to the county 4-H fair, and we'd, of course, judge the animals, and that was a chance to be out for 3 days. We'd be at the fair, and so every time my heifer would have another heifer, I would keep the heifer. And so my grandpa, I'd milk the cows with my granddad, and of course he owned the barn, and he paid the taxes on it, but he very generously, he had all the expense, but he very generously, when we milked the cows, we would weigh my milk. So when they paid, he would give me from his milk check my share of the milk, and so I kind of rat-holed that money, and when time come to get a bicycle, I was able to buy my own bike, and so going on to Howard City High School before Tri-County was ever thought of. So in 1956, I and my new wife joined the Air Force.
Okay. Can you tell me your wife's name, maiden name, and...
My wife is Janet Ravell, and that's back before the days where they put Janet Hagart Ravell, but Janet Hagart. Her dad actually owned the Howard City Record. He was on the school board, the local Howard City High School board, and talk about 4-H. His brother, Janet's uncle, was Claude Hagart, and he was the leader of the 4-H group.
And Janet's father's name, what was it?
Walt.
Walt, and his wife?
Ann.
Okay.
Yeah. Ann was later became the secretary to the principal at school for decades. So everybody knew Ann. Either they were happy, they were in trouble, and she got them out of trouble, or but everybody knew Ann. In school, had a physics class, and in there they had Ohm's law about electronics. So what does a farm boy know about electronics? So one of the aptitude tests that took when we joined the Air Force was electronics, and the Air Force I wanted to be a jet mechanic. When my granddad and I would be out on the farm hoeing, on a hot summer day, and that's when jet airplanes just become kind of a big deal. And a jet Air Force plane would fly over. I think that must have been a recruiting operation for the Air Force. But anyway, a jet plane would fly over, and I thought, boy, I'd sure love to be a jet mechanic. So I joined the Air Force. I thought, yeah, I could be a jet mechanic. But the aptitude test with my physics experience of Ohm's law, and the Air Force needed electronics people. I was in electronics, and it was a 9-month that was when Russia was going to come over and annihilate us, and we had the interceptors that would go up and shoot them all down. Well, I was working on the F-102. That was the first supersonic all-weather fighter interceptor. And the electronics, I was in Denver. It was 9 months. And that was next to the longest electronics school the Air Force had. And to give you the intensity of this thing, for 9 months, the school started 6 in the morning to noon. From noon, another class from noon to 6, and the third class from 6 at night to midnight.
We'd like to thank our sponsors. West Michigan Technology and Design Solutions is your perfect choice for managed IT, website design, website hosting, and consulting services. WMTDS.com, 616-485-7600.
Great experience with the Air Force. Loved every moment of it. My wife definitely wanted to stay in and make a career of it, but I was going to get out and make big money, in electronics. And the last year there's a major modification to F-102, and I was involved with that. And we'd romance for employment to the people that owned that company. And of course, in the service, they wouldn't talk to you. But I got out of service and went to Alexandria, Virginia, working for a company that made radar simulators for the Navy and the FAA. And I've been there about 2 months, and we got a notification from this company, Land Air, that doing a modification for the F-102. Well, that's what I did for the last year, so I was right on board, and the pay was there. Of course, it was moving about. You're always moving. You go to cheaper to move a crew to a base than it would be to fly all the planes to a repair depot. And so we got per diem, and back then I got $49 a week per diem, and times 4, that equaled what my base pay was in the Air Force. So that was a pretty big deal. So we off we go, and we're in Jacksonville, Florida. That was the longest they had a crew in one spot there for a year and a half. And then we went to Germany, to Rhine-Main, Germany, and then back Mobile, Alabama, was working on the F-105s. And they're putting a Gatling gun, a major electronics modification, but they're also adding a Gatling gun onto the side of it. So it was in Mobile, Alabama, and then to Las Vegas, doing the same modification. And they had quite a few of the Army squadrons. There's over about 110, 120 planes. And we did get into a hangar we could get 8 planes in at a time. And it had the engines out, the cockpit out, because my small structure, where the pilot had his feet, there was an electrical connection up there. So I had to go up and add 2 wires to this electrical connection. So I had a little tiny toolbox with the tools I needed for that specific job, and wedge myself up into that small area and do this modification. And it was nice being in Las Vegas. It was, of course, a gambling town, but we during our experience in F-102, neither my wife was Catholic and I was Baptist, and neither one of us was going really to church much. And when we were in Jacksonville, Florida, this was Easter, and all the crews were from Florida, Alabama, Georgia. They were home for Easter, but this one family was from Red Wing, Minnesota. And they said, hey, we'll go to sunrise service, and we'll get a bushel of oysters, and we get some beer and go out to the beach. And I said, yeah, that's for me. So anyway, whatever the preacher said that day, he kind of had interest in my wife, and she talked with him a couple of times on the phone that week, and we went back the following week. And shortly after that, we went to adult education class and become Lutheran. So every time we go to a new job site, we'd look up a place, a motel, an apartment to live in, and then look up the Lutheran church. So we were in Las Vegas, and the Lutheran church, the background, maybe a third of the people were show people, and a third were local, and I don't know if the other third were transits like myself. But on the weekend, we'd go out horseback riding and walking in the desert, and it was just a fun time.
So while you were in the service, you were around quite a bit. What year did you get out of the service, and what brought you back to the area?
Well, I was in the Air Force. It was 4-year enlistment from 1956 to 1960. And then I worked for this land air modification company for like 7 years. And at that time, my son was in first grade, and we'd moved twice, and the school year was half over, and he was kind of struggling a little bit. So we thought maybe it's time to settle down. And we were in Columbus, Ohio, and that's the closest we'd been in 7.5 years. So this was a short commute home, over the weekend. And my mother was an occupational health nurse in Federal, and the GE had a plant in Edmore, and the Nurses Association get together periodically. And the nurse in Edmore was telling my mother that they were looking for an electronic person. And so on one of our weekend stays, my mother was saying it had to be Armistice Day, and everybody had, the government had the day off, but everybody else was working. So I interviewed GE in Edmore, and they offered me a job on the spot. By the way, that's an issue, They take anybody that they can scrape up off the floor. They offered me a job on the spot pending a physical, and of course I passed the physical and worked so we're back to Michigan, and well, of course we're used to renting. Well, downtown Edmore, there was one apartment complex, and it was all filled, no place to rent. So my mother says, well, why don't you just move back on the farm, get a trailer and put it out where the lilac bush is, where the old log cabin was on back. Put a trailer out there. So we did, and at that time my granddad had passed, and my mother was staying a month with my aunt and a month with her. And Ma said, yeah, that way Grandma could move back on the farm. So my grandson, he'd catch the school bus out in front, and come home from school. My grandmother would have a dinner already, and hey, George Henry, come on over. George Henry, that's the second George Henry there. Yeah. Actually, my name, George Ravell, is from my George Ravell, my granddad, and Henry Beisch, so George Henry. So George Henry, come on, I got dinner ready. So she'd come over, and they'd eat dinner, and then she'd call my wife and say, don't worry about George Henry, he's already ate. So that was a great time for her to be back. And so this time, the barn out back kind of sat empty. There were no cattle, no livestock. When I joined the Air Force, I sold off my cattle, well, I was farming, with Grandpa. So the barn really had served me well up to this point. So now we moved back, and I'm working for GE, and I thought I went to work in quality control, and then when I was a kid in high school, I had interest in auto body repair. And somehow I squirreled around and found a hard book cover about auto body repair. So, that was right next to it. That was right next to a Bible on your nightstand. I would read my automotive book. And while I was in high school, farming, but I thought I needed a job. So I went down and interviewed at the local gas station, and at the end of our conversation, the guy offered me a job. Again, the first time, you get the job offer right off the bat, working in the gas station. And he wanted me to come in early. My last hour in school was a study hall. And so that was maybe the beginning of a school to work program. But, and I didn't know it, but the boss at the gas station and his brother-in-law, that's when DDT spray rig, there was a big thing. They had spray rig on the back of a pickup truck, and they'd go around the lake spraying for mosquitoes. So when mosquitoes started coming, he had me come in, working full-time in the gas station, opening it up in the morning and being there till 9 o'clock at night, and his wife would come out at 9 o'clock and pick up the receipts. So here I am, a 16-year-old kid running a gas station. So that was, what an opportunity that I don't know if we get that opportunity today or not. Back to school to work. We're going to get more to school to work going.
So all these experiences took you up to coming back, working over in Edmore, and the barn was empty. The information, or the you said you had a car that had needed some body work. And tell me about when the barn became kind of an auto body place.
Yeah, as a kid, when just interested in auto body repair, and my boss at the gas station, he saw that. So he'd go out and buy some used cars that needed some repair, and I would fix them up. So, matter of fact, the day before I went in the Air Force, the fella had a new 55 Ford that had booger on the fender, and he brought it to me with his new car to fix the fender. So the day before, I fixed the repair and sprayed it that night. In the morning, before I went into service, I was buffing it off, and delivered the car, and you couldn't tell from a brand new. So, I'm proud of that. He was pleased with it and paid me. In the Air Force, they had a base hobby shop. And so you could rent a stall for up to 3 days. And I got the guys are talking about scoops on a hood. So I could do that. So I kind of had a name for putting scoops on a hood. So I'd do that in the body shop and a little minor repair stuff. But I got getting out of the Air Force and going to be electronics. No more messing with these dirty, nasty old cars. Hard work. I'm going to be electronic technician. So now we're back working for GE and just happy as a lark. And lo and behold, we got rear-ended. And there's a plastic bumper. The whole part was one plastic piece. So I could pull that off and to get a used one, and borrowed my cousin's paint sprayer just to spray it. So word got out at GE that I did that. So they'd bring me, can you do this? Can you do that? And yeah, okay. The business kept growing, so I'd get the local high school kids, and they would come after school and work, and the deal was that they had to be in school and they had to have good grades, or they couldn't be working. So then I had a guy full time and these 3-4 high school kids, and of course the body shop was now in the barn. So now instead of a cow barn, it's a car barn.
We'd like to thank our sponsors, EW Video, your film and videotape specialist. They design websites and business videos that tell and share your story. dwvideo.com, 231-250-9624.
Talking about starting a local community college, Montcalm County, the Montcalm Community College. And working at GE, my boss's boss, Fred Dozier, his wife was very instrumental in initiating the starting of the college, and then the operating the operation of the college. And when it first started, of course, I was graduating from Howard City High School, and when I worked at the University of Magnetics, the way to sell was trade shows, and so you have a 10-foot area booth, and our booth, we pack it all. I had 2 cases that we could fly, put it on an airplane and fly. And so after 3-4 years, they invite us, University of Magnetics, to be speakers on a program. And they would get up and they had to be listing, some were, of course, BS and masters, and some were doctorates. And of course, here I am, George Ravell at University of Magnetics. So I got to get some letters behind my name. So now starting community college, and I said, yeah, that's for me. I'm going to go to college. And the school, they didn't even have any buildings that time. They're doing classes at the different high schools. So this is, we would drive over to Montcalm Community College, Montcalm High School, Montcalm High School. And the professor was from Grand Rapids. He's an older fella, and he actually is a nice guy. And I don't know, I can't blame my problem on the professor. But anyway, I got taken English 101, and I got a D+, and maybe that was a gift. And I don't know if this is for me or not. And it was during the holidays, so I kind of pulled myself up on my bootstraps and went back for the next session. But I had a new instructor, a young kid from Grand Rapids, from the same community college. Anyway, I got the scent, and the way I went, and I got a B+, and that time I earned it. So now I'm working at GE, and of course Mr. Dozier and his wife is involved with that. And I was a salaried employee, so some of the classes would be in the afternoon. And so my boss would say, just go ahead and go. So yeah, I worked 5 years in quality control for GE. And then GE, Schenectady, New York was GE's development thing. It was a big deal. And they were assessed a certain percentage of their sales from Edmore went to the development. But Edmore thought they needed more development activity. So they started their own development engineering group in Edmore. And in quality control, I made application for that, and they hired me. Again, that first job, the first offer you get, I don't know if that's a good thing or not. R.J. Parker was my boss, and he actually had written 2 books, and was an international speaker on permanent magnets. And matter of fact, his son, I remember, his son graduated from Michigan State and is a teacher, and he had just came to Howard City, interviewed, and they offered him a job. And he was out in front of the plant talking to his dad, and I don't know, I was someplace where I shouldn't have been, but I come scooting around the front of the plant, and there they were talking. And Parky said, "Yeah, you're from Howard City. You know the Tri-County School." And they said, "Yeah." His son just had started to teach there, and of course he went on to be a lifelong teacher and coach, and everybody knew Mr. Parker. So R.J. Parker was the best boss in the world I ever had.
We'd like to thank our sponsors. Custom Vinyl Signs and Busy Bee Embroidery and Gifts is your one-stop shop for embroidery, vinyl, screen printing, and engraving needs. Go to cvsdbusybees.com or call 989-261-7446.
Year before, GE sold to Aachi, and before GE sold to Aachi, they laid off 134 salaried people all in one day, and I was one of the 134 laid off. So I worked for an electronic company in Grand Rapids, and it was a good job, but actually at this time I had four children, and the expenses were tight. And so the guy says, a fella I knew sold starters and alternators, and he said, "You know all about the electronics and the starter and alternator stuff. You could do that." And so unbeknownst to me, he said, "Here, take some of my rebuilt starters and see this area you could sell." And I didn't know, the Saturday was a business day going for the repair guys. So here I am with the station wagon with a bunch of starter and alternators pitching about this rebuilt starter and alternator is better than new. Lo and behold, I got like 3 accounts in that one day, and this is a pretty good business. I could do this, and so I got into the starter and the alternator business. And then the guy says, "Well, you know about that. You could rebuild those." And so during the time I worked for GE, did the body shop stuff, and when I got laid off, I just quit doing that. Just totally quit doing it. And so now this guy says, you can rebuild the starter and alternator starter. So now we're rebuilding, instead of a body shop, from livestock to a body shop, and now we're rebuilding starters and alternators there. And it was a pretty big, pretty good business. We had 4 people working real time, full time, rebuilding, and would disassemble them and degrease them, and we had a tumbling sandblast, aluminum castings, and so again, the rebuild was better than new because all of the weakness, we knew what the weaknesses was, and they'd like bushings, they'd have a different bushing, a different style bushing to improve all of the weaknesses.
And this was happening in the barn?
In the barn.
This was in the barn.
All in the barn. One night I got a call from the people I worked with in GE, and they said, "Hey, there's 3 of us got together, and we were wondering about starting a business, and all of the woes we talked about at GE, we could improve that, and so we're going to start a business in the magnetics." And normally I kind of got to think this over a little bit and sleep on it at night, but I immediately said yeah. And so we started a company called Universal Magnetics. So we was going to build a pole barn next to the Red Farm barn, and that's where Universal Magnetics was. And
what year was that?
1977.
1977, okay.
And right away, we were going to do things with permanent magnets, but with what I did in Edmore, and my background was in magnetizers, and so it appeared that really the area of our expertise was in producing magnetizers. And so that's what we did. We made capacitor discharge magnetizers, 500 volt, 1,000, 1,500 volt units. And of course, the magnetizing fixtures to measure the solenoid to measure north and south pole, or around a motor one that'd be multiple poles, north and south, north, south, north, south. And I was going to move for universal magnetics, and I was going to move the start and alternator business on one side of it. And before we moved, I had a chance to sell the starter and alternator business, kit caboodle, and all of the associated related equipment. So now the pole barn is totally universal magnetics. And now the poor barn sits there all alone, laying by itself. Of course, if you got storage, empty spots, there's a place to store stuff. So one corner is my son's storage, and the other place is for general storage. And of course, the center part, where anything you can drive in the center, that become a storage.
So it's amazing how the barn has taken on many different needs over the years, and it's still standing and looking beautiful today.
Yes, it is, and we try to give it a coat of paint periodically to make it still look like a red barn.
And I'm sure there was a day that you painted it, but there's probably a day now that you have somebody paint it.
Yeah, my wife, put a metal roof. She says she didn't want some 80-year-old fool up there on the top of the roof trying to fix it. So we got a metal roof on it. So yeah, the barn is many, as a kid, used as a kid and as a youth, and then the different applications. And I have a picture of it, of my mother and my aunt and my granddad out in front with a team of horses and with a buggy, So the barn still has a near and dear spot in my heart. So the life of the barn continues on.
I think that's a great place to stop. That's a great history. I want to thank you for your time today, George. And I remember sitting in your office at 5555 at Universal Magnetics with Dorothy, and you, and just, as you said, trying to fix all the world's problems, or at least talk about them anyways. But it's been my honor to be, I guess, a friend, and look at both you and the Ravell family as an extended family that you just, you guys have done a lot for the area, and I just want to say thank you for all that you've done.
Well, certainly, it's certainly a pleasure, and it's great to be a part of the area. Thank you.
Well, this was the first edition of the If This Barn Could Talk series, part of the Discover Montcalm podcast. If anybody out there has a family farm, reach out to me. I would like to tell your family's story, just like I had an opportunity here to tell George Ravell's story and his family. It's something that I know will be cherished, and it has special meaning to me. It means a lot that I was able to do this for him, but right now, more importantly, that I'm able to do it for the family and his friends. So if you have a barn that has a story, you have parents or grandparents that maybe built the barn, or we could come over and we could talk about your family history on If This Barn Could Talk, on part of the Discover Montcalm podcast. Again, my name's Duane. I'm the host and producer. You can find Discover Montcalm Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can also check us out at discovermontcalmpodcast.com. Check out all the episodes there. Grab the RSS feed and put it in your favorite podcast browser. This story meant a lot to me, and I'm glad I was able to tell it and share it with you. I would like to take and share your story. Just like anything else that's going on in Montcalm County, I want to be able to share that story with the listeners and the people of Montcalm County. So remember to buy and shop locally.
Connect and subscribe to Discover Montcalm Podcast at discovermontcalmpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Discover Montcalm Podcast. To be featured in an upcoming show, contact Duane at 231-250-9624. Remember to subscribe at discovermontcalmpodcast.com.
Take it away, George. Okay. All right. I didn't know if I was going to get through that. I'm sorry. I'm purposely not looking at you for a reason. Oh, I thought, and she's going to watch me do this. I'd rather she see it when it was done. Oh. Now I got to come up with a closing.